KAL KORFF and the MEIER HOAX, a response PT. By Wendelle C. Stevens. The following comments are intended as rebuttal to accusations made in KAL KORFF's article, The MEIER Incident, the most infamous hoax in UFOology, published in the December 1980 issue of Mufon. We chose to start this book about the encounters with the Pleiadian contact team at the point where those contacts began. Space was our limitation. There were our 4 press releases of any kind indicating that Jim Lorenzen, or APRO, endorsed the book as being a genuine representation of the facts. The statement, fumished in Jim Lorenzen's own handwriting, still on file at Genesis 3 Productions, reads, described MEIER as a sort of person who gets great satisfaction out of fooling authorities. That is also completely unk. The correct statement, conclusions that and obviously unsound. I will have to take on our own pre-publication flyer for the book. After the flyer was printed and in mailing envelopes, because of flack at home, wanted to add them in the order in which they appear. Another line to say that at this time, he appear in his article. Considered the photographs in the category of excellent art, not science. We agreed to make the change if he wanted to bear the cost of reprinting, which Lorenzen never published. I had mentioned that MEIER was from a very poor family, and his poor clothes and lack of ability to participate in events at school, for lack of money, set him apart from the other boys, and that he was often made the butt of pranks, and was frequently punished for things he did not do. The statement was, MEIER learned to smile inwardly when he had to suffer for things he had not done. He considered the inability of the teachers to see through the setup as a deficiency on their parts. How Lorenzen, or anyone else, got the other completely different inference from that, accidentally, is difficult for me to see. The book does not say, anywhere, that any of the photographs of the flyers, he declined, so we retain the original statement. UFOs are authentic. LT says, nothing was found to indicate trick photography, UFO Journal. Critics such as Korff have the advantage, in that it takes much more space to adequately respond to unsupported accusations than it takes to make them. One thing which puzzles me is the fact that experienced researchers have allowed a relatively immature newcomer to become their collective spokesman in this case. KAL KORFF raises so many misquotes. Korff's first mistake, or deliberate distortion, appears in the first 5 lines of his article, recording over 3,000 pages of quotes from them, Pleiadians. The book he refers to clearly says, on page 35 of the first edition, over 3,000 pages of notes on Mr. MEIER's phenomenal encounters. In the same paragraph, he suggests that we have said the rock and metal specimens defy conventional explanation. The correct phrasing in our book is, that, in reference to our present technology, was not immediately explainable. Nor do we declare, anywhere in the book, that all, or even any, of MEIER's claims are genuine. The closest we came to that was on page 43 of the first edition, page 45, second edition, where we said, this could very well be the first authentic evidence-supported case of ongoing extraterrestrial contact with Earth humanity. In the third paragraph, we are also misquoted about MEIER's first experiences with extraterrestrials. Again, the quote actually reads, first mittens of a man's ongoing encounters. At least the preponderance of material is too much for an objective mind to ignore in good conscience. Signed, Jim Lorenzen. This was used. I am not a 1/4 partner in Genesis 3 Productions, as Korff alleges, but I do insist that MEIER sought no publicity from anyone concealing his experiences. He had already survived 4 assassination attempts by gunfire and certainly didn't seek any more attention. He refused to accept any money for the material he gave me and signed a rights agreement without accepting any money, believing that whatever we did in the United States would be a long time in coming back to him. When I asked him about the statement Korff attributes to Wilfried Falk, that he planned to write a book about his experiences as early as 1977, MEIER said that Falk asked him if he planned to write this up as a book and that his reply to Falk was, perhaps some models, or other suspicious techniques. Nothing was found to indicate a hoax. Distance and size measurements are proper in relation to location measurements taken by the investigators, and the reported size of the craft is appropriate to the calculations done with computers. Work on the photographs is continuing, and we still have not found any way to successfully duplicate them with small models. We did not say, nor does the book imply, that DANSA Systems did some of the analysis. They aren't even mentioned anywhere in the book. We have stated elsewhere, however, that we used DANSA computer graphics equipment because it was the best we had found. D*Y. In that same paragraph, Korff quotes Lorenzen as saying that I continued on NCRT PAG, MEIER photos, continued viewed 6 of the main ones on audio tape for psychological stress evalua for this kind of work. They also had the best edge identification man-inch testing. They were analyzed by 2 different PSE agencies using DIP, the business working there at the FAC Ferrand equipment, and all were found to believe the answers they gave to the prepared list of questions. Lack of Tory, and we consulted him. We did the testing. We were looking for the best equipment available for a model laboratory for this particular work, to be financed by a production company who was then interested in making a documentary film on this case. We turned in our report, but the project was later superseded by something else and the lab didn't get funded. We have never demonstrated the photographs to be authentic. Scientifically, that cannot be done to any UFO photograph, short of having the ship at hand, with proof of its origin, which would also be unprovable, without going to its supposed point of origin for verification. We said only that we have eliminated the possibility of all known methods of hit photography, and lab techniques known to modern photographic space prevented inclusion of these data in Volume 1. The Pleiadians did not say that they originated from the star system of the Pleiades. They told MEIER they came here from the direction of the constellation are called the Pleiades. They have an entirely different name design technology in Poway, didn't prove the photograph authentic. It R/ID eliminate many lab tricks and hoax techniques. It concluded with a statement that, nothing was found in the examination of the print which could cause me to believe that the object in the photo is anything other than a large object photographed a distance from the camera. There are actually lens photographs of the Swiss Army Mirage jet fighter making passes at the UFO, with the ship high and low, nearer and farther. They are all in a correct sequential order. We have only released one. There is a total of 23 witnesses to the various events described by MEIER, each participating in some way at different times. We have taken statements and depositions, both written and oral, and on videotape, and have especially also oral years. This is an assumption made that MEIER's camera was jammed just short of the infinity setting, maybe 732nd of an inch on the rotating engine is still open. The gaseous nebulosity seen around the Pleiades, as California. I have Neil Davis' written report of the analysis of one photograph, which I furnished. The analysis was thorough and well done, but Korff's next statement is wrong. The book does not claim that MEIER's camera was jammed for millions of years old. Richard Norton, formerly director of the Flandreau Planetarium at the University of Arizona in Tucson, says that the latest calculations sometimes Mr. O. Shining thorough analysis of several of the MEIER photos by Dr. Neil Davis of Or Nation with Nation, very long, and that must be overcome before we can marshal the resources of the world. By Korff, from my own statements men, I have no unpublished paper this time. They observed that we can't even get along with each other, for it. The Pleiades are not only show the basic Pleiades are considered to be between 500 million and 1 billion years old, still relatively young stars, and not old enough to have produced Mufon or life-bearing planets by the same evolution as ours. However, if they were helped from outside, there are other possibilities. The case Klintz. Knowledge, we might be able to achieve many of their capabilities within 300 years of our time, if we would sufficiently concentrate the energies of our planet. They didn't see any possibility of us doing that at Dex, for most of the photos which were taken. What he also failed to consider is the fact that all of those photos were made over the first 15 months of contact with the aliens. For the first 8 months, they did not let the secret out of a ver, small group who had only the broken camera that could be held and operated FO MEIER with his one hand. He had become familiar with it. Also, he never X the most popular of which is, dupected to get a second or third set of pictures. He thought each opportunity would probably be his last one. It would have taken weeks to have his camera repaired and he had no money for such expenses. The remainder of Korff's statement on camera optics fails to conform to the facts, as anyone with a basic knowledge of photography will know. The metal samples were actually they believe in Jesus Christ. They do not advocate any particular belief. They were simply comparing their analyzed at 3 different laboratories by 3 different methods, one of which was the analysis done by beliefs to ours. Marcel Vogel. What Korff failed to note, or deliberately omitted, is that Vogel only analyzed one single specimen of metal. My very brief summary in the book on Vogel's work with the shown in the book, has been especially revealed by filters and special exposures. That effect is not clearly visible to the naked eye. As for the quotes from the alien cosmonauts, Rowe selected them, not MEIER, and we selected the ones that seemed short enough and appropriate to most of the questions being asked. The quotes attributed to James Hurtak have either been copied wrong by Korff or Hurtak doesn't read German as well as he claims, as the aliens contacting MEIER said, first of all, that they do not count time the way we do, and secondly, that if we could compare evolutions, it might be said that theirs is about 3,000 years ahead of ours, according to the way Rowe count time. The aliens also suggest in another contact metal specimen was abstracted from 2 hours of videotaped analysis and 3 hours of recorded discussions involving dozens of photographs. All of this is in Mr. Vogel's own words and the tapes are in my possession. We did not release anything other that, because of the curve of the growth of, continued on next page, MEIER photos, continued then the preliminary steps, because we agreed that Vogel should be the one to release any particular details at his own pleasure in his own choice of forum. He evidently did not consider Korff an appropriate spokesman. We should not overlook the fact that Marcel Vogel is one of our most brilliant scientists who, as a chemist, has no peers. He is a senior research chemist at IBM's main research laboratory. He pioneered luminescence technology, including the development of fluorescent and phosphorescent products, did major research on microscopy, magnetic films, etc., and invented the floppy disk so essential to modern electronic technology. He has pioneered new experiments in man-plant communication and also in energy transference using prepared crystals. He chose not to share his research liquid crystals, optical findings with KAL KORFF. Omni magazine arranged for a 4th analysis of a specimen of metal, to be conducted at MIT. The letter carrying the piece of metal for analysis took 29 days, first-class mail, to get from Tucson to OMN2 offices in New York City. Liebelson, an assistant editor Harry of the magazine, advised me that he personally delivered it to MIT. The scientists who received the metal from Liebelson later told him that they lost it before getting a good look at it. We should not forget that MIT is a contract university used by many agencies of the government, including various intelligence agencies. Frankly, I felt from the beginning that if they did find anything interesting, we would be the last to know about it. We did not connect the great structures of history to the Pleiades. We only reported a few of the connections which had already been made by others. There are, in fact, scores of such connections in our files. The references were identified with quotes from these other sources. Korff seems to take special issue with the reference to the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Perhaps he is unaware of the extensive relationship of UFO sightings with this landmark. There is even an old report of a UFO landing on top of the tower. It is reported that Steven Spielberg's movie company had an actual UFO experience there while filming scenes for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but that he played this down to avoid being accused of staging it. Korff's facetious references to MEIER having met Jesus Christ stem from a misstatement by Coleman von Kevitschke, whose distorted views were acquired during his very limited, one-day, investigation of the MEIER case. He did not go to the MEIER property, did not interview any of the current witnesses or civil and military authorities. He did not check or view any of the evidence available at the MEIER property, only visited one of the contact sites, and did not visit any of the photo processing agencies that developed MEIER's film. We have heard and are more inclined to accept for study some of the claims to having flown in the spacecraft and to have traveled in time, but these are still only stories unfounded in demonstrable fact, and we are unable to test their validity. We have reached no conclusions on such stories at this time. Korff gives me far too much credit when he alleges that I have masterlkter omni veritas. Mufon readers of the November 1,9 SI Omni magazine will conclude I have lost my marbles. A UFO update I wrote on the Betty Hill star map has been editorially rewritten and now contains inaccurate and I neither authored nor approved. I did not write anything about the Hill case being warranted statements that reveal, ed, as the most elaborate LIFO hoax ever perpetrated. This editorial insertion grossly misrepresents my outlook on the matter. The breakdown of the fish interpretation of Mrs. Hill's alien star map returns the abduction claim to unsupported anecdotal testimony but not a deliberate hoax. Other inaccuracies were introduced into my original text. I did not describe the Hill's UFO as star-like, it with large angular size. Also, Mrs. Hill never expressed a belief in which stars were they claim they saw the aliens home. Finally, the sentiments of Terry Dickinson, precisely stated to me for Omni, were not presented here. I regret that these problems seem attributed to me author. As the Alan Hendry Stone Mountain, G.A. minded this development for some stamp contributions personal reason. To summarize our feelings on the Korff article, it is our opinion that the analysis released by GSW is no more solid foreign stamps from the following 8, than subjective interpretation of Polaroid photos of non-specific tests, made by spatial data systems from a standard catch-all program on file at SDS for the testing of all UFO photos sent to them by GSW. The results of such tests are neither scientific nor substantive, and it seems obvious that Korff does not know the difference. A discussion of the GSW analysis will be in Part 2, next issue. There is one puzzling thing about this article. I have called a number of the individuals listed in the acknowledgements and they tell me that they did not give Korff the information he attributes to them in this article. Some, in fact, were quite angry to we acknowledge receipt of Ken Bill Banks, Oakland, California, Larry W. Bryant, Arlington, Virginia, Don Berliner, Alexandria, Ferrome Clark, Lake Bluff, Dr. Robert C. Davis, Dallas, Texas, R. Bruce Jordan, Palo Alto, California, and Mr. and Mrs. Rex Stanford, Jamaica, NY. A collector compensates Mufon for the stamps, and proceeds are applied to international exchange of UFO information. Send contributions in any number to Richard Hall, SSTS 39th ST. Brentwood, Maryland 20722. Find that their names had been used. Is KAL name dropping again? Or do some of these people really believe KAL is correct in his statements? N. Ronald. BL. Buckaloo 3L+0 Ibrook Road, Richmond, Virginia 23227M5/82. The Mufon UFO IO Urinal November 1981 number 165 S1.50 founded 1967 FFTCAL publication 0FN UFON Mutuate UFO Network Incorporated. KL Filaru ARLL 0LD IFEUEU, I94TWLLIS, 1981 photo by Greg Long LKALK0RFF and the MEIER H0AX, Arispoius, PT2 by Wendelle C. Stevens, Part I, in the Pyrenees issue, dealt with accusations and alleged distortions in court. FS article in the December 7980 issue, number 154. This part concentrates on the GSW analyses of the MEIER photos. It is essential that a full response be given to Korff's lengthy section on the role of GSW and their computer eye analyses of the MEIER photos. Korff's first statement concerning first-generation copies of the photos is false. No first-generation copies of the photos were let out of MEIER's hands, except those which were stolen from him, until March of TGZZ, when the original diapositive of the cover photo of our book was released to a Munich TV station for a news item on the Swiss case. It was returned 2 weeks later. This is one of the photos we tested exhaustively. AII of the original diapositives were taken into from either MEIER's album or from stock prints in MEIER's collections, both being prints made from Scootspotch's 35mm copy negatives. These prints were already slash or lens systems from the originals. Shooting them onto slides again added a TITH lens system. This is the best Falk could have had unless he was one of those who stole some of the original diapositives. The slides I have seen from this lot do not look any closer than 5th generation. Someone also provided a set of the same slides to Coleman von Kevitschke, and it may have been the same MEIER Falk. I have a set of these slides and mine are certainly dim and off color. Second lens system from the UFO itself. We did all of our testing on 4 of these internegatives. This is the closest to the original that has been tested, to our knowledge. We have not allowed any of the originals, except the cover photo, out of MEIER's hands for anything. The rest are protected in safes and will not be produced until no further testing is possible on the internegatives, and only if a serious question remains in doubt which only the original could resolve. Then that one original may be taken by courier to an appropriate testing facility for examination in the presence of the courier, to be immediately returned by him to its depository upon completion of testing. As I have explained in responses other to criticisms, the modes of computer enhancement are quite specific and are most productive when particularly applied to each separate maid. Some are even crops of the originals. On the other hand, I have taken these became the master prints from MEIER's remaining original diaposi photograph. The buckshot treat which Hans Schutzbach made copy in the same program is not much better than no test at all. Held camera. These became the file tips to the best custom photo shop in Zurich, Photo Kino, and had custom internegatives produced in 4x5 and 7x9 cm sizes. This is the fund. Continued adequate funds are not now available. Suffered physical and emotional trauma during a UFO close NR, a computerized data bank study of UFO sightings, a study of Spanish physical trace cases, a compilation have direct positive prints negatives by shooting the prints again on 35mm negative film with a hand counter, which was apparently under observation by military helicopters. Asterisk provided a grant to Ted Blocher / Bud Hopkins / Aphrodite Clamar for intensive study of a group of witnesses who have reported being abducted by alien humanoids. Asterisk made an award to UFO International Annual Review, UPR, the first scientific refereed journal devoted to the UFO phenomenon, Bologna, Italy. T negatives from which all subsequent prints were made. As the pictures MEIER Falk sent to GSW were in positive slide format, they had to be shot. Asterisk funded the writing and preparation of a carefully researched UFO slide/tape presentation for educational purposes, to be loaned to schools, libraries, and community groups. Some of the additional proposals now under consideration, for which an astronomical analysis of pre-7947 sightings, and an extensive catalogue and study of the 7896-97 airship mystery. The fund has also alerted Mufon investigators to the fact that financial aid can be quickly funneled to help pay for laboratory analysis or clinical tests in promising CELL or C3 cases involving potentially significant physical evidence. The fund's quick response effort has a high priority, as long as the funds for it are available, to help assure that important evidence will not be lost due to lack of appropriate analysis or testing. These are worthy goals to benefit all of ufology, but they require the support of everyone who wants to meant of running 10 different photos. Continued on next page, obtain meaningful, scientific evidence on the NAR of UFOs. Contributions are deductible on 1981 61 79 82 federal income tax returns, LRS #52-7764776. Mufon members who wish to earmark a contribution in the name of the organization may do so by indicating this on the check or in a covering note. We plan to report the amount of Mufon support in a future issue. The fund is also offering for $30, $, of which is tax deductible, a collection of UFO documents released by the FBI and CIA under the Freedom of Information Act. Information supplied by Dr. Bruce V. Maccabee, Chairman, and Fred Whiting, Publicifa Director. Fund for UFO Research, Box 277, Mt. Rainier, Maryland 20712. 11 MEIER photos. Continued. I checked out the GSW methods in 7977,1 found that GSW, when was sending batches of up to 10 photos at a time to Spatial Data Systems of Goleta, California for processing in a program designed for them by Dr. Bruce Maccabee. This program was the best anywhere up to that time, and Dr. Maccabee had done a good job of designing a program where none existed previously. Spatial Data charged GSW $AO.00 per computer hour for operating costs, which worked out to $8 per photo in a batch of 10. For that, GSW got 4 steps: edge enhancement, color contouring, pixel distortion test, and digitization for each photo in the batch. This processing was done on the plant demonstrator equipment by the salesman, who shot a color Polaroid print of the video display for GSW, which was sent back with the print, with no comment. All of the analyses were then done subjectively by GS\N from those Polaroid prints. Perhaps that doesn't sound so bad until you talk to a computer programmer, and the science is so new that even they don't all agree, but they state that such fests are only meaningful if they are quite specific. In other words, there is considerable variation in these steps. For productive edge enhancement, you must know what you are enhancing for, and this is true of the other steps also. Each case will be quite different. You can color contour for many different things, and you have to be specific if you are to get meaningful results. This is also true in lesser degree for pixelizing and digitizing. The most important step however, is the first step, introducing the photograph into the computer. Everything else depends on this. Spatial Data was using an off-the-shelf popular video camera in the $RSU price range to introduce the data into their display setup. They didn't even have a light table and no filters and lens attachments at all for the camera. This alone could have negated the results of their testing. We used the most expensive camera I2 and lens systems at the SPY Symposium in San Diego, listing at $SZ000, to introduce our images into the storage system. We also used the top-of-the-line Hamamatsu microdensitometer for digitizing at both 5 micron and VZ micron sizes for analysis. We also used their thermoluminescence burst test equipment to study possible radiation effects on the emulsion crystals in the images. This was only the beginning of our analysis, and we failed to find any evidence of fraud or hoax. Regarding the GSW analysis, their first statement that most of the 10 analyzed photos are extremely light above the UFO image, the image itself was washed out too, should have told them that they had many generation copies before them. That this would tend to mask any supporting structure is true. Their second statement, that the UFO images are out of focus when compared to other features of comparable distance from the camera, is completely misleading. Unless they had walked over the photo sites and measured the distances, as well as marking the apparent position of the UFO based on the witness best estimate, they could not possibly know what other features were at a comparable distance. In most of the 10 photos they had, there were no other features at a comparable distance. And it does not indicate that FRA effects on distant features in the photos are not noticeable on any of the UFO images, is also wrong. A glance at the facing photos, in sequence, on pages 29 and 30 of our book, will demonstrate this misinterpretation. In Volume 2, we will present a series of photographs in sequence, showing a dark point in the distant atmospheric haze as it approaches and grows larger, frame by frame, until it is recognizable as one of the craft in the photos tested by GSW. The fifth statement concerning shadows is a strange one, considering the fact that the Swiss sky in this vicinity is usually white. In a white sky such as this, you in the trees aren't casting any shadows. In the sixth statement, we find that this handicapped man is supposed to have successfully employed 3 types of hoax photography. Let's look at these. A suspended model. This is perhaps the most likely method that could be used. However, no one has ever found the model or the suspension rig, nor has anyone ever found the string in any of the photographs. And here I specifically refer, also, to the very photographs which Korff used to illustrate his article. The UFO is close to the camera. Those despite the fact that the first photo is upside down, there is no evidence of a suspension line, top or bottom, in the photo. This is the same object depicted in the second photo. Opinions are entirely subjective and which have no basis whatsoever in fact. The third statement, that considering the focal length of the camera, all calculations place the UFO at 4 lines, but the string doesn't start at the top of the UFO and it stops halfway up. The other artifact that crosses 6 feet, is also completely false. When I shot photos of a model, in focus, filling about 20 VO of the width of the image frame, as some of those in question do, at the mean distance of 5 feet, GSW said 4 to 6 feet, I got a model UFO measuring 6 inches in diameter and all other objects beyond 10 feet from the camera were badly out of focus. The titles of books in the background were indistinguishable. Something is wrong with Korff's printed does show artifacts. Unusual. The middle of the image is conveniently ignored by Korff, as are 3 more such artifacts exactly like these which have been cropped out on this photo. They are completely outside the image area of the UFO. We did not find any of these on our examination of the second generation. We had sharp, clear, dense images to work with. We advised our colleagues in this research negatives and of GSW's discovery and they were also unable to find such anomalies. Reason mess. The fourth statement, that Atmos, continued on next page, a MEIER photos, continued B double exposure, now this would be difficult indeed. Nearly all of MEIER's photographs were shot on 36 frame rolls of positive transparency film and on more than one excision. He shot more than 3 rolls of the double print. Explanation for him and he would have difficulty go such a photo is ridiculous. And coming with chemicals, models, equipment, or anything else on his open moped transportation and he still had a 1 limitation. Of the spacecraft near a tree on facing pages 35 and 36 of our book, I states that the computer digitizing scan of the edges of the UFO and foreground features. Korff reveals that the UFO is in the same plane. First of all, this is fallacious at the 5-micron digitizing done by spatial data systems. The pixel count would probably not vary at all across any of the edges in the picture at this broad a range. The second implication, that they are in the same plane filmed during the UFO event. In some of the series of photos, he photographed the ship above the horizon and then descending below the horizon, with the frames in numbered SE measured that distance to be 52 yards, RSO feet, from the camera. By consequence, sometimes there were other obstructions in the photographs. To successfully shoot 108 frames, in SE systems, which included a color contour treatment on Dr. Maccabee's program. This was only a simple color coding program for basic because separation, in primary colors, of basic data, with no definite purpose. This photo, not shown by Korff, was pub the movie camera, or the tripod, or of the UFO image against a dark background, then go out and shoot a 10 or 12 frame run in sequence, with the UFO in proper position relative to the new background scene, every time, several times in succession, without having the image get lighter by the second exposure and without having it in a position where it overlaps something else or crosses another positioned line or is mal in flight. Trajectory in sequence as it gets smaller in size going this is away from the photographer, stretching the point a little. We must also remember that while he is successfully doing this, more than once, he is using a camera that he can't look through or change the focus, plus being one-armed and having to do everything with that handicap-C double print method. This admittedly could be done in a laboratory, even a home photo lab, but the nearest lab to MEIER is 80 kilometers away. For him to do it himself is out of the question, so he would require collaborators. He would need equipment and facilities. He has no equipment and no easy access to any. He had no running water in his house, no assessing chemicals were available near temperature control, bare bulb electrical power and no darkroom potential, no available space, no privacy, and no storage place for equipment to keep it unseen. None of the witnesses there ever saw any photo processing equipment around, and no one ever saw him using any or any evidence that he had used any. There were 8 people living in the house, all potential observers. No photo computer analysis mentioned by Korff. I must assume that this was the one made by GSW through spatial data listed in Japan's UFOs and Space magazine. It showed the entire object T and the same shade of red as the entire key and LRIs in the picture. Now even an untrained eye can see that the top of the object is not anywhere near the color of the tree, nor is the bottom. To get the same color for both means that the red was assigned for all values ILR the tree and the UFO. This is no analysis. On the other hand, contrasting colors could have been assigned, one to the shades of brown in the tree and the other to the shades of blue and gray in the UFO. We would then have a different picture entirely. When we tried this, we found the branches to be L and tirant of the UFO. The photographer actually estimated the craft in the photo to be about 50 yards beyond the tree, out over the valley, even beyond the top of another big tree down the hill that looks like a bush at the base of the primary tree in this photo. I don't know how GSW interpreted the branches of the primary tree to be behind the UFO, since they all came out in exactly the tin red color on the color contouring used by GSW. That the density, gray value, of the shadow bottom of the UFO varies appreciably from features in the tree should be expected. They are at different angles to the sun and of completely different textures. If they did not vary, something would be amiss. Because of this, is difficult to analyze. They don't mention which picture they are talking about. However, except for the shots with the moped in the scene, which are not in the 10 photos sent to GSW, there are no close foreground objects for comparison, except trees, and they have a different finished surface. The edge of uniform density on characteristically edge from smooth the UFO is to be expected since it was hovering when the photo was made. A model of 8 inches diameter, up to OVO of the width of the picture frame as OBA suggested, taking served, would be 7 feet from the lens, anything beyond 15 feet would be out of focus at most settings. We do not find this in the MEIER photographs. Korff then goes on to state that all these frames can be duplicated with a basic camera and darkroom equipment. Von Kevitsky stated the same thing, yet neither of them have come up with even one such photograph. In our case, we have a wonderful society here where we can obtain everything we need in the way of equipment, chemicals, and facilities. We have running water, controlled temperatures, print dryers, darkrooms, special lights, etc., and we have both arms and as many Confederates as we care to work with. Why haven't they duplicated just one of the photos in question? The statement that the bottom portions of the UFOs are always dark is certainly unfounded, as may be seen, continued on next page, 13 by Andruffel interpreting the Bailey gas following the publication of Part I of Controversial Entity Photos from California in this column, January 1981, number 155, a Pandora's box seemed suddenly unlatched. An account of Harrison E. Bailey CE3 in a wooded area outside Orland Park, Ill, on September 24, 7957 was received favorably by many researchers. The case did not seem to differ substantially from dozens of other CEIIs and CEIVs which have found their way into print in respected journals and Moss Avernies. However, in January 1980 the same percipient, now a licensed Baptist minister in Pasadena, California, brought forward a dozen Polaroid pictures which were purportedly MEIER photos, continued by the photographs shown on pages 15-17 to 78-79 37/38, 55 and 58 in the book. I suppose that by Korff's line of reasoning, these are the 20 to 30 foot diameter craft. There is no ground shadow visible in the picture frame on the cover photo of the book because the shot was made at 5:30 in the afternoon and the sun's low angle would cast it completely out of the picture to the left, if it were distinguishable at all in this white sky. The photo sequence of a disc-shaped craft circling a tree is actually reported to have taken place over a time estimated to be 3 to 4 minutes. The clouds do, in fact, move faster in the higher valleys here. The nearest is 80 kilometers away, in Zurich, in a large valley with a big lake, and their weather is completely different. Clever superimposition of the objects that are both below weather station and above the horizon and cross the skyline, as suggested by Korff, with no evidence of the skyline showing, would be a clever trick indeed. 74 film record of an alien visitation into his home. As a consequence, the Bailey case became unacceptable to some researchers, even though his unusual visitors seemed to be an abduction aboard an oval craft, examined by two short-statured aliens with distorted features, same creatures whom he had encountered in 1951 and which had seemed to visit him occasionally during the and to the American people. Intervening years by means of experiences he thought were vivid dreams. These researchers seemed unable to accept implications of paranormality inherent within the visitation as described by Bailey, and also permanently imprinted on the pictures themselves. Several serious questions have been raised regarding the manner in which the case was investigated, towards certain hypnotic techniques used. In 1977, to elicit details of Bailey's apparent abduction experience within the landed craft in 1957, and toward Reverend Bailey's character and emotional stability. These questions took the form of editorial comments by my good friend and colleague, editor Richard Hall, in the January 1981 issue and also in a letter to the editor by Alvin Lawson, Ph.D., whose comments in the April 1981 issue reflected the feelings of W.C. McCall, M.D. as well. I feel obliged to answer all the specific questions raised on this case. The main problem is lack of space, since the questions can only be answered by explaining complex situations in Reverend Bailey's life. Short replies cannot adequately clarify the misunderstandings. A good place to start, however, is with the comment by editor Dick Hall that, during a May 18, 1977 hypnotic session, Bailey was repeatedly prompted and was obligingly suggestible as described and given a message which he was to carry back to the U.S. government. Editor Hall picked out one paragraph in the 42-page transcript in which Dr. McCall, as hypnotist, asks Bailey to use your imagination. I want you to imagine you were taken aboard. Studying the entire transcript, it becomes clear that this particular technique was employed by Bill McCall to try to break through a stubborn block, seemingly caused by fear of ridicule in Bailey's hypnotically regressed mind. Several techniques had been tried prior to this approach during the same session, but had produced no results. Seeking to clarify the situation, I asked R. Leo Sprinkle, Ph.D., a pioneer in hypnotic of UFO close encounter witnesses, to give his opinion on the SES Zion's transcript and received the following reply: to whom it may concern, I have been asked by N. Druffel, ZSZ Sycamore Glen, Pasadena, California 91105 to offer my opinion regarding the typescript of an interview with Reverend Harrison Bailey, with hypnotic suggestions by Dr. W. M. McCall and UFO investigators Dr. Alvin Lawson and Mrs. N. Druffel. I am happy to provide my opinion and I am willing to respond to specific questions or comments about this statement. Verifying, or even evaluating, the information which came out of the hypnotic session, however, I believe that Dr. MCI have no way of call has done an excellent job in providing suggestions which were acceptable to Reverend Bailey, so that Reverend Bailey might explore his memories, or impressions, of the experiences which had occurred to him in 1951. He continued on next page.